Now, I know a lot of people don't like to hear content like this. And if you clicked on this, don't click away. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know when it comes to talking about affirmative action and things of that nature, it is boring. You guys want to hear the juicy stuff. You guys want to hear the bickering and the arguing and the disrespectfulness. But sometimes it is good to listen and educate yourself, because then you're going to end up looking like the idiot that wanted to debate Mr. Richey, Dr. Motherfucking Richey. They want, and it's like, I understand it is boring and I understand it is not cute, but to be uneducated about situations like this is the reason why something like affirmative action was taken away. Because nobody even understands the reason why it was implemented. They don't understand the benefits that it created, the opportunities, obviously, that it created, and the impact and the effects that could possibly happen. People don't know this because, you know, judging on my last video when I talked about affirmative action, no one clicked on it, which is weird. You know what I'm saying? But when I post about, you know, talking about Ben Shapiro or Candace Owens, you know, everybody in their mind want to click that. But when it comes to affirmative action, nobody wants to hear it. And it's, I got a long way to go. I got a long way to go to educate these people, man. Like, but anyway, we're going to watch this clip. Dr. Richey speaking to some writer for some organization, and just how clueless he was when it comes to affirmative action and how it benefited. And the one most important person who affirmative action did benefit and now is responsible for taking that away. It's just crazy. And a lot of people don't know this. But guess what? If you made it this far, you're going to be one of the few people who will know this information, because I don't know, people don't like to be fully informed. They just want to be fully entertained, you know? So let's go ahead, watch this video or watch this clip, and we're going to have that conversation.
In the bullpen today, we have Mr. Zachary Yost, who is a Pittsburgh writer, base writer, and freelance researcher. His work has been published in various outlets, including the American Conservative, Washington Examiner, and the National Interest. Mr. Yost, good day. Welcome to Indisputable.
Hello, Dr. Richey. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you for being here. We are going to chop it up about the latest Supreme Court ruling as it relates to affirmative action inside of colleges throughout the country. I don't want to presume what you know or believe about this ruling, so if you would, give us your sentiment and I will then opine.
Sure thing. So I will say I was very pleased with this ruling. I did think it was the right decision. That's not to say that I don't think there aren't a lot of issues in higher education that I think that affirmative action was trying to solve. But I think it was sort of way too blunt of an instrument, and especially I don't really think it was fair to Asian students. I mean, there's sort of lots of stats that were brought up in the court case about what seems to be discrimination against them. And I would say that, as you pointed out last week in your commentary, I believe a lot of colleges don't have competitive admission, so it's not an issue for those schools. There are colleges that do, and a big factor in that is legacy admissions. And as I believe your guest last week said, you know, those are a huge issue. And I agree that that is sort of a next step that I think people could come together on to try and make access to these elite institutions, which I'm very critical of. We could complain about them further later on if you'd like. But yeah. I think the decisions come down. So now the question is, what can we do about it? And I think legacy admissions. If you receive federal funding, can't have legacy admissions. I think that's more than fair and just and would be very helpful.
Let's talk about the reason you may like the ruling. I'm a college professor. I've been a college professor since 2016. We were bracing for this ruling, knowing that it could have went one way or the other. There was also a sentiment it may be a split ruling, given a state and private institution dynamic, but it was not. Why do you believe that getting rid of affirmative action, which by the way, is not really a policy. Affirmative action is a set of diversity inclusion policies. They called it affirmative action as a catch-all phrase. Why do you think it was right for the Supreme Court to take away a tool that institutions are able to use in order to diversify and provide opportunity for individuals who have been historically discriminated against, even though they qualified? And I submit that question in this context. Affirmative action does not take a non-qualified person and make them qualified. It takes a qualified person and provides an opportunity for them to also illuminate their experiences based on a racial context in the decision-making process or the recruitment of the individual. That's what it does. But if you don't meet the bare standard, the minimum standard, you don't get that opportunity anyway. So I submit the question to you in that context.
Sure, and as I think the Roberts opinion said, it's not like someone's race is not relevant to their life experience and all that, and you say it's a tool. I don't think it's a very good tool. Well, I think it's far too blunt, and David Bernstein, who's a law professor at GMU, his work was actually cited in Gorsuch's concurring opinion. In his book on racial categorization, according to the government, he points out that at Harvard, something like 2/3 of Black students are either immigrants, the children of immigrants, or biracial. And if the idea is that affirmative action is supposed to be a tool that will help people who are underprivileged, who have faced discrimination and whatnot, if we just say, well, this person is of African-American descent, or is just from Africa. If the son of some wealthy Nigerians is not going to have the same experience as the son,
that's really interesting. So, Mr. Yost, you are arguing that because of perhaps a misapplication of the implementation of the program, it should then be deemed unconstitutional. That doesn't make sense to me. We typically judge the constitutionality of a thing based on the context of statute, constitution, and current era. And in current era, for 4 decades, the Supreme Court has upheld that institutions of higher learning are benefited by diversity on campus. So because of that great benefit, they are allowed to make these particular, let's just say, standards or designs in their programming. But I will submit this to you. Do you not see this as a prerequisite to get rid of all diversity inclusion programs in the United States of America? Because the legal framework utilized in order to basically protect this particular ruling can be used for private businesses all across the nation. Don't you see this for what it is, Mr. Yost? This is your first step at getting rid of all diversity and inclusion programming.
Well, I don't think that necessarily be a bad thing, as such diversity requirements and whatnot exist.
Why is it not? Why do you say that would be a good thing to get rid of diversity inclusion programs?
Sure. So I think that there's sort of too much aggregation, basically, when it comes to it's sort of a faux diversity. The government racial classifications, which underlie these sort of diversity initiatives and whatnot, don't really make much sense. There are something like 60% of the world's population is Asian. But a Sikh in India is not, and a Polynesian, they're not really comparable. It's sort of just this giant lump of people who are very different, but according to our sort of very weirdly arrived at framework from basically the 60s, they're the same. And so if a school could say, oh, we have, 30% of our student body is Asian, but a smaller school with a lower percentage of Asian students could actually be more diverse if they have students who count as Asian who are from places all over Asia, which is a huge, vast continent.
Once again, first of all, I don't even know how the hell that actually applies to what we're talking about. So let me try to get us back on track here. Do you know what percentage is mandated by the government under the old ruling? What percentage of diversity was mandated by the government inside of institutions?
I do not know.
None.
Zero.
Yeah.
None. No percentage was mandated, sir. That's the point that I hope you can absorb. While we talk about how these programs were somehow adversarial, well, you're talking about implementation. So let's get better on the implementation. And if there's discrimination because of faulty implementation, well, we have a court of remedy. You can take it to the federal court and argue direct discrimination rather than overturning 4 decades of equity programming that has allowed individuals like Clarence Thomas himself become a Supreme Court justice. Do you not find it the height of hypocrisy that the very individual who is serving on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, is an affirmative action individual? He was able to get into Yale Law School by way of their affirmative action program. Don't you find that quite ironic?
So, just knowing that should have you scratching your head. I know I'm scratching my cheek, but it should be having you scratch your head on why someone like Clarence Thomas, who is a nigga, who is black, who had an opportunity to go to a top school because of affirmative action, then made his way to the Supreme Court, which you just can't apply and just get like it's some Walmart job, then has the audacity, has the nerve to turn and shut down the thing that gave him an opportunity and closes that door for everybody else. What? Why? Why? Who and why? Okay? Who and why? And what? Okay? Let's just answer all of it. That makes no sense at all. And why couldn't an adult walk into that room and just say, no, we're not going to do this? Clarence Thomas? Why? I don't know. Let's
in a way, I suppose it could be considered ironic. On the other hand, I believe Clarence Thomas has spoken about how he feels that has made him seem lesser in some people's eyes. And
no, he's lesser because he's a sellout. That's why he's lesser in some people's eyes. He's not lesser because he was able to benefit from an institutional policy that said, we are going to take into consideration your experience as a black male in America, because we know that the experience can be adversarial to fairness. That's not somehow wrong. And sir, I submit this to you as well. Clarence Thomas gets into Yale Law based on affirmative action. He then gets appointed to a director position, Civil Rights Division for the Department of Education. He then becomes the chairman of the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission. All of these positions, dear sir, implement, execute, prosecute, and bring up issues of racial inequity. And the very same person who benefited from affirmative action gets to decide that no one else can. You can understand why someone would be upset about that.
Why?
Sure, I can understand why people are upset about the whole entire ruling. And I believe Justice Thomas said explicitly at one point, I think in the early 80s, that he really benefited from affirmative action, but
Oh
it
man.
seems that he's changed his mind over the years, perhaps from exposure to how these programs, I would posit, are not really carried out in a beneficial way. I think they're undermining.
They benefited him.
Oh,
It benefited
true.
him, right? So when you say it's not carried out in a beneficial way, you got Clarence Thomas, don't you? I'm sure you support him. A guy that you support is on the Supreme Court by way of a policy you don't support.
I don't know where he would have ended up without affirmative.
hey, I would have just ended the conversation there. I would say, you know what, sir? Have a good day. You can't make this up. You can't make this type of idiot of a person say such a thing. Just say, you know what? That was kind of stupid. Like now that you frame it like that, Dr. Richey, you're right. Why would anyone else on that Supreme Court probably could be like, affirmative action, we need to get rid of, okay? But Clarence Thomas, someone who literally benefited from that, is against it? Really? 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 Is this the kind of world we're living in? Oh, sweet Jesus.
Affirmative action, but
you think he ends up on the Supreme Court without a Yale law degree? You think he ends up being appointed as the civil rights director for the Department of Education? You think he ends up becoming chairman of the EEOC without having his Yale law degree, sir?
Well, I don't know if he would have not been able to get into Yale. I don't know what his test scores were and whatnot. But
that's not the issue. Sir, see, you just made my point. Remember, affirmative action, which by the way is a catch-all phrase, again, it's a diversity inclusion program. The diversity inclusion program did not lower the standard for Clarence Thomas. He still had to meet the standards. Everybody still has to meet the standards of the institution. The only thing affirmative action or diversity inclusion programming would do is provide another opportunity to explain who you are and why you are. It's just like schools that will say, we care about your leadership capacity. We care about your extracurricular activities. We care about the fact that you have demonstrated the ability to overcome difficult circumstances. All of these things can be weighed in the decision process after they meet the bare minimum requirement to even enter into the institution. So it is not a question of if he was qualified, dear sir, he was qualified based on the standards.
Well, I would say that this was part of the reason the lawsuit was brought up by sort of Asian students, is that it's a zero-sum game in these elite institutions with competitive admission. If one student is accepted, another student might not be. And this was a point that was cited in the majority opinion.
That happens every day, dear sir. In every competitive school, that happens. We have an American system that has routinely discriminated against people of color, women, historically marginalized communities. This was a way to correct the dysfunction. You do agree racism exists, right?
Sure.
Okay,
good.
That
can be questionable.
We agree on one thing then. We agree racism exists. Do you agree racism exists by way of design?
Well, I suppose that would be a complicated question. There are certainly policies in place that hurt minorities. I would not.
So if it exists by way of design or architecture, you cannot deconstruct the construction by happenstance. You can only deconstruct a constructed thing by intentionally deconstructing the constructed thing. You get it? You can't fix this without intention, dear brother.
So I would agree. I think we just have a different idea of what tools are appropriate to do that.
All right. We're out of time. Producer wrapping me up. But Mr. Yost, I'm gonna bring you back, okay? We'll have this.
Hey, I don't know. I don't know what gives people the feeling, do not go on these shows if you are not prepared. Do not just willy-nilly just show up I'm assuming he knows who Dr. Richey is. Don't show up to the bullpen if you ain't ready to fight. If you don't have your I's dotted and your T's crossed, do not make a fool out of yourself. I need people to understand the importance of situations like this. I could choose to not make content like this and try to inform in the best way that I can for no reason. Because these, disingenuous people are playing like 4D chess in a sense. They're doing this for a reason. This is not their end all be all, we did all this to end, affirmative action, when it comes to these colleges. What is their bigger game? What is their bigger goal in this? They're not doing this because they really care that people are being mistreated and handled unfair when it comes to colleges applications. If they really did, the student loan debt will already be handled. Some of these college tuitions and things of that nature would be dealt with and not continue to rise. If they really cared about education and people getting this they'll make it a lot more obtainable and not such a baggage after you get out of these schools, because you end up paying this debt for essentially the rest of your life, depending on what you got. But they don't care about that. So why are they doing this? So once again, I need you guys to understand, educate yourself, inform yourself when it comes to a situation like this, because sooner than later, we're going to ask ourselves why and how in the hell did we get here? And we're going to look at this one moment in history and be like, well, they took affirmative action away and, it led to this, that, and the third, A, B, C, X, Y, Z. But everybody's, worried about the Real Housewives or something stupid like that. Like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So once again, if you guys think I'm incorrect, if you think I'm just, being paranoid and don't know what the hell I'm talking about, even though I did the research, took a bunch of notes, but if you think I'm wrong, and I got the data, I got the numbers, let me know in the comments. And like always, let's have that conversation.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to join the conversation by subscribing. Make sure to tune in next time, and like always, power to you, power to me, power to the people, power to the pod.